Welcome to the M.A.D Radio Show. We are broadcasting you live from Globe Life Park here in the heart of the entertainment district in Arlington, Texas. I'm sorry about the opening, but we could not get our music to start playing. We're still having some technical difficulties, and we're going to work through those. This is our first day back in the studio. I want to welcome Sam Horwitz, my new co-host. How you doing, Sam?
Hello, hello. Great to be here.
Man, you were a guest on our show a couple of times. I loved having you on, and I'm glad you're now my
I'm
co-host.
official?
You're
Am I official?
You're official.
All right.
You're official.
All right, I love it.
We moved into the Globe Life Park. I want to thank the Fishbowl family. I want to thank Sammy G, Jamie, Carlos, Angelo, and Gary for the hard work, for the numerous hours they put in moving us over to this location from our other studio off Randall Mill with the water main break. They had to lug everything here. They up and down 4 flights of stairs because the elevators in the other building didn't work. And they got them up here, and they got us running in less than a couple of months.
It's amazing.
So it was a tough haul for those guys, but they did it in the name of all the hosts for Fishbowl. Fishbowl Communications on the rise for 2020. It's our 11th year. We're looking for a banner year, man. Now we got the XFL right out our studio window. We got the home of the Texas Rangers, the old home of the Texas Rangers. Looking at those seats, man, and the icons that used to play on that field. It's amazing. How do you feel about the studio, Sam?
Oh, it's absolutely gorgeous, and I guess this is like a carrot being dangled in front of everybody because
Right,
the cameras are all facing this way. You guys are not able to see the beautiful field because the XFL is now playing here, so we're looking out onto a beautiful turf. Well, is it turf or grass? I don't know. Do they play? Do you guys know turf or grass? I'm not sure. Anyway, Oh, you're gonna turn it around? Oh, you guys, check it out. Yeah, there you go. There you go. We're gonna show you guys what we see, and it is absolutely spectacular. I have been in numerous studios, TV and otherwise, and I got to say this is the best view. So thank you, Sammy, and everybody from Fishbowl for pulling this off. This is a special treat that John and I get to do this every week, every Wednesday, 6 to 7. We have a wonderful, wonderful show tonight, and this is just super cool.
So who do we got on the show today?
Tonight we have Shahidrah and Kathy, and Shahidrah and Kathy are from an incredible organization called Frontline Crisis Response Solutions. We're going to get into what they do, how they make a difference in the lives of not only our first responders out there, but just the public in general.
You know, we've been working so hard to break the stigma, trying to bring awareness and help families of our first responders, and we can't do it alone. And I thank God for you guys helping us and bringing this forward and really taking it to the next level that we can take it to with the medical treatment and the therapy and stuff like that, because we're just there to raise the awareness. You guys are really we're passing the ball off to you, and hopefully you can run it in for the touchdown.
Well, the classes that they hold for first responders, it's a blessing. I've been a part of it as a presenter and an audience member, and they bring real life. So it's not like hidden. So we talk about real stuff,
right,
and what's going on the job, but you all help us use the tools that we talk about to make ourselves better at every level, and the education and everything that you pour into that. It speaks volumes, and that's why they're kicking off our first show.
Yes,
Okay.
and there's going to be many shows to have you back on, because this is something we're not going to stop with. And M.A.D Radio, Making a Difference Radio, has always been about providing for our first responders, our military, and our community projects throughout the area that do things to raise community spirits, like the Travis Manion Foundation, Mission Continues, and numerous organizations such as that. And we're going to focus on those groups. As you know, we kind of cut our our hours down from 2 hours to now an hour, so we can be more focused on a specific group instead of spreading it all out. So we're going to be bringing you more and more awareness on all these groups that that we're going to focus on and highlight. I guess spotlight them as much as we can. So let's talk about a badge of honor real quick. It's a workshop that myself, you, and Jeff Freeman have put together. You did a beautiful slide deck. The presentation is amazing. Want to give us a little background on that?
Yeah, sure. So this came out of, frankly, an idea that came to me that was just so impactful that is really missing. There's a lot of people talking about post-traumatic stress, and I call it post-traumatic stress because I'm not disordered. So let's just get that straight for the show.
Well, yeah,
we dropped the D, but we're moving on to dropping the stigma that comes along with the word disorder and turning it into I. So PTSI. So you want to talk about the injury part?
Well, what's funny you should say that is that on the last show on 99% Radio, we had a call in from a female officer, Minion they call her. She's the president of the Fourth Watch Motorcycle Club. Her husband is battling PTSD, because that's what she knows it, because he's a vet, and he's also a firefighter. And he went through some really tough things. And she did the same thing. She goes, I apologize to all those people that are saying PTSD when it should be PTSI. So even in Virginia, they're starting to realize that it is an injury. It's not a disorder. And she just felt that she had to say that because so more people would understand.
Sure.
But we're going to get that PTSI out there, and we're going to really change that. We're going to drop that D soon.
It is all about bringing awareness to what really post-traumatic stress is,
right,
and how it affects us. And so, I didn't have a title, and just one day it came to me. I've been working on a lot of stuff throughout the years since I launched my book, and it's like, how do I affect my community? How do I make this big? Oh, let's call John and Jeff. I mean, it was like a no-brainer. You having me on the show as a guest and all the work that you do, and meeting Jeff through Frontline Crisis Response at a tactical wellness workshop that he presented. I'm like, this just fits. We all have a similar background in law enforcement, but our experiences are different. So our traumas are different.
Right.
But our symptoms are the same.
Good. I'm listening. I'm just sharing with a couple of police groups around the country that want to be part of this.
So part of this new studio is John gets to do all the goodies and try and multitask, the stuff that I'm not really good at because I can't even type and speak at the same time. But he's a pro.
I got like two mices in my hands, and I'm just trying to do both.
Yeah.
But
so we came up with this workshop.
Yes, which has been a success so far. We
has.
started it right here in Arlington.
We started it right here in Arlington. How special was that? And
I know.
It was an invitation,
right,
from the library, who got like, what are you guys doing? What is this? Well, we need to have it here. It's in the community. We were at the downtown library, open to everybody, free, and we had an incredible turnout.
Yes, and with that, we had such amazing feedback from those people that did respond, that we put a second workshop together, and the Rockwall DA's office invited us there to really touch base now on the first responders. And they had firefighters, they had police officers, they had veterans from all over the community and the surrounding communities.
Yep, 911 dispatch.
Right. We have Christine, Assistant Chief Christine Martinez from Grand Prairie Police Department come down. So we really made an impact on the the whole DFW Metroplex came to Rockwall that day.
Yes, they did, and it was very special. I still, my husband's like, man, you're just smiling more. I'm like, well, that's why.
Yeah.
Because it's all about it's not about us. We're
right.
telling our stories in order to help a community get better, and really. The focus is through our stories to let everybody know that it's okay not to be okay.
Right.
Suicide is not the answer, but it goes beyond that because people are walking away with, you know, the tools that you use to get through what you talk about, your period of anger, the tools that I do, that I practice every day to deal with stress, which, I mean, who doesn't have that, right?
I know.
And then Jeff is just like kaboom. He just comes in and he is
he's like a bull in a china
yeah.
shop.
Yeah.
Yeah, no filter, no nothing.
No.
But he gets his point across, which is amazing. He gets those hard hitting issues right down, and he gets to the soul. You know, me and you kind of do the digging, and then he just like stamps right out.
Yeah, we're like the story scientists of it. And Jeff, that's how we connect, because he is talking about exactly what the officers, the firefighters, everybody sitting in that audience has gone through.
Right.
Not everybody, you know, we're in Texas. You and I, we went through the worst terrorist attack, you know, in U.S. history.
Right.
It changed the landscape of everything the way we do. It's 2020, so many years later. Everything that happened on 9/11, folks, you live the way you live
because of that.
Because of that. All the security at the airport, everything that's in place, that came out of 9/11. So while people weren't there, John, with you and I, and what we saw and experienced, they're there with us because of how we tell the story and what happened to us. So they're like, oh, it's like, I don't know about you, but I look out into the audience and it's like, check, yes, that.
Yeah.
Oh, that happens. Yep.
And, you know, I hope no one ever has to tell those stories again. Mm-hmm. I really hope no one ever has to tell those stories again. I hope we never have to go through something like that again. And I tell you, what we do when we do tell our stories, it is a self-healing process. As much as it takes every ounce of energy for me to get through a lot of that, because I almost break down most of the time, it is a self-healing process. That
well, you're real. Why shouldn't that's the one thing that we don't do is, while we know we're there to deliver a message, we're real.
Right.
It's real life. This is real life for these folks.
But you know what's weird is like, and maybe you guys can tell me, maybe because if I'm talking to my buddies, if I'm sitting there talking to my buddies, or I'm talking to family, or if I'm, it comes nonchalant. It doesn't get them. It's not on an emotional level, which is really weird for me because, and it's like I could talk outside of it, but when I'm giving that class, when I'm giving that workshop, I guess it's just the passion or the emotion inside me. It fills me up, and I see that in you, and I see that in Jeff, and I think that's why the workshop works.
Yep, and that's what carries us to do the next one.
It's really impactful. So
when's our next one?
The 29th of February.
That's
over
right.
at the V-Rock.
Leap year. Happy leap year, everybody.
Yep, the 29th of February at the V-Rock. You can register online at www.abadgeofhonor.com.
Yes, please register.
Yeah, please register so we can get a head count, because the V-Rock is going to be supplying some food, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. We'll have lunch.
Yeah. And that's going to be a 2 or 3 hour workshop?
9 to 1.
9 to 1. 9 to 1, okay.
So we're expanding it.
Oh, excellent. Oh yeah, and we just added the family stuff.
Sitting right
yes,
here.
so me and you were sitting here talking and yapping, and like, well, when are we going to talk?
Yeah.
So come on, tell us about Frontline and what you guys are going to do.
Yeah, why don't you guys introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about you, how you are part of Frontline. I'm going to show the brochure, what the mission is, and
Sure. So my name is Shahidrah Cowgill, and I'm the Director of Clinical Programs for Frontline Crisis Response, also co-founder with my dear friend here. I'll let her introduce herself. But I just want to say thank you guys for having us on. This is your kickoff show. What an honor it is for us to be here. We really appreciate being a part of this movement. We love what you guys are doing. And one of the things that I am so excited about is just the collaborative process for all of us that are like-minded to be able to come together and raise awareness. So I'll be quiet now and let Kathy.
Hi, I'm Kathy Burden, and Shahidrah and I met about 7 years ago, and we met in a crisis intervention class, and I was quite intrigued by the fact that she was mental health and wondered what she was doing in that particular class that I was taking. And she explained to me that as she was being educated, that some of the things that they did not deal with in her education background was crisis and how to deal with trauma. So we started talking over a period of about a year, and one day we said, I think we kind of live in a traumatized nation, and we want to make a difference in our community. And that's really how Frontline Crisis Response Solutions started. It's made up of different disciplines, fire, EMS, police. It's made up of mental health, chaplains, teachers, nurses. And we just all came together and said, look, we need to serve our community. We need to start talking about the hard subjects, the things that others do not want to talk about. And so that's how it got born. And ever since, we've been going 100 miles an hour, just trying to help people.
And what's the mission behind, what exactly do you guys do to assist?
Absolutely. So when we first started, we launched a Survivors of Suicide Loss program for Collin County. We saw that there was a huge need for the growing northern part of Texas and how there weren't that many resources for those who were left behind after a suicide loss. And so that's really where we started. We were void fillers. We saw the need, and we had a trained team that had taken ICISF courses on grief and loss and trauma, and that's basically where we started to offer a support group. Over that time, so we started 1 to 2 people would come to those groups. As the years have gone on, we've had more people show up, obviously because the suicide rate has increased just in general in the population. And so that is one of our missions, to continue to serve the need for our community members who are on a journey. It is not a 1 day, 1 month grieving process. It's really the rest of their lives, and knowing how to pick up the pieces and continue to live and thrive. So that's one of our initiatives. Our second initiative, one of the other things we started with, was our crisis response team. And one of the things through our training is we know that, when something happens, it's too late to train, right? It's too late to prepare.
Right.
And so the crisis response team was really geared to be a community support in the event that a tragedy hit, our community or close enough to our community. And in that time, we've been able to answer calls, we've been able to train, we've been able to raise awareness around our crisis response support. Hence the name, Frontline
Right.
Crisis
Right.
Response Solutions.
So when you say you're going to respond to a crisis, is that alarm, like a first responder crisis, or say a tornado goes through and people need your help as well? You'll respond as crisis intervention as well, that for peer family support and everything else?
Well,
Or is it just first responders?
Yeah, we started out really broad in the very beginning. Since we've launched our Wellness and Resiliency program, it has really been geared more specifically to first responders and the layers of first responders. A lot of people don't realize that it's more than just fire and rescue or law enforcement. It goes on to dispatch. It goes on to advocates. It moves on, as the concentric circles go out, the layers of first responders, of people who show up to events and have to support the people who've been impacted in an ongoing fashion.
And can you give folks kind of an understanding? I know that you were called to El Paso.
Yeah.
Can you just tell us what you can to kind of give everybody that's listening, like,
Sure.
okay, this crisis happened,
Sure,
major, and this is how we filled the void and helped there.
Absolutely. So in August, in El Paso, you guys are aware there was a Walmart shooting.
The shooting, right, yep.
And so after that event, most people don't know that the state of Texas called a state of
Emergency?
Emergency.
A state of emergency, thank
Yep.
you, for the state of Texas. And what that does is it activates a specialized trained group of organizations that can be dispatched or deployed to those areas to offer support. And so our team, a part of the IFOC CISM network, or the IFOC Texas CISM team, was one of those organizations that was selected to go down and participate and support specifically first responders. And so our team was a multidisciplinary team. I was the mental health lead on that team, along with first responders and chaplains. And so we spent a week down in El Paso, probably 3 weeks after that event, So what happens when a crisis hits, or a tragedy, or an active shooter event? What happened in this particular situation was that the officers and the first responders, they didn't get a day off. They were still on call because
Right.
there were dignitaries, there were people that they still had to
Got to do the job.
do their job,
Yep.
right, with still a very large crime scene.
Plus,
And
didn't we
so-
have an officer shot on that one as well? Was that the one we had an officer
I don't
shot just
believe there
prior
was
to
an
it?
No.
officer. Yeah,
Oh,
there
no
was an
officers.
shot. Yeah, there was a lot of lives lost. So we do continue to pray for those families. But we went, and in the aftermath, at the time that those officers were starting to get days off, that we were able to go in and do debriefings and share with them, what to expect in the days ahead, how to ask for help, where to go to specialized support for first responders. And really gearing towards sharing, if these things happen, if you guys are in the red zone or red flags happen, here's how you get help and here's what you need to be asking for.
So even though you are a therapist,
Yes.
right, by trade, the purpose of the crisis response, that almost immediate, is not to be there to offer therapy. It's to take care of the folks in crisis, or those who may be in crisis, by doing the debriefs and then saying, hey, if you're recognizing these signs, symptoms, there is a place, or there are resources where you can get help beyond what you all did. Do I have that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
The other purpose was to give them all a chance to be able to talk with their partners about how they experienced that event. And so it was specific units. It wasn't open to everybody. It was specific units that we actually went in to talk with and offer support.
The ones that were at the crime scene.
Absolutely.
The ones that were directly involved with the crime scene. Now, let me ask you something. Did you do any follow-ups on this to find out? Because some cops are just, chest out. They don't,
Yeah.
they'll listen to that help. But were anybody actually come on and say, you know what, I'm having a bad time. Did you do follow-ups?
We did. We had an opportunity to follow up with a number of first responders and to just check in with them. Like I said, when we got there, many of them were going into their days off. They hadn't had time to spend time with their families.
Right.
And so we were hitting a really interesting time period. But during that time, they said, yeah, if you're here, we want to talk to you. And so we did have that opportunity.
That's the important part about it. Back when Sam, when me and you were on the job, is there a criteria for? Because I remember going on crime scenes where you had multiple people shot. You had 4 or 5 fatalities. Sometimes 4 or 5 fatalities and a couple other people shot. And there was no state of emergency. There was no crisis intervention. It was just another day. That's the way to look at it. I'm glad they're not looking at it as just another day anymore, and they're bringing teams like you guys in there, and we're getting a positive response. Because even if you get 1, 2, or 3 officers out of 50 that respond, that's still, that's still huge.
Right. And I want to ask, how did your hearts kind of get connected? What is your background that made you say, we need to fill this void?
Well, my background is my father-in-law was chief of police in a really small town in East Texas, and he was killed in the line of duty. And I remember at the time that happened, I can still remember all of the law enforcement, the highway patrol, the sheriff, different ones. Actually, 2 officers were killed that night. And I can still remember what that was like. There was no one to guide us through the process other than to take over doing the funeral, and just saying, this is what you do. And then after your loved one is buried, what do you do with that?
It was almost robotic, right?
Yes, it was robotic. The town was devastated. And I remember thinking to myself, someday I'm going to be able to help somebody. I actually have a law enforcement background. I actually got a degree in that. And so I've always kind of been intrigued by it, never worked in the law enforcement field, but I've always just had kind of a connection with it because of my father-in-law.
And Shahidrah?
Yeah, so my background is in mental health. By training, I'm a licensed professional counselor supervisor. That's a mouthful. Outside of FCRS, I own and operate a group practice in Frisco with an awesome team of clinicians. I specialize, I'm a trauma-trained therapist. I'm EMDR trained, and I primarily work with service members, veterans, and first responders. A little bit about my background. My dad was a fireman with the San Francisco Fire Department for 30 years, and so I saw the first responder lifestyle from the family aspect, and how it impacted our family and just growing up in that type of culture. It had its perks, but it also had its downsides. And so as far as us connecting and our hearts joining, I think us having those experiences from the family side of it, and also, timing. This is such a critical period where we're seeing suicide rates increasing in the first responder community, in the veteran community, in the military service community, and it's just a need. And so again, we're void fillers, and all we need is an opportunity and a space to connect with people to do what we do and offer the support. Yeah.
That's awesome.
You bring up two really good points where your father-in-law, chief of police, was killed in the line of duty, firefighter, San Francisco, grew up around that aspect of when we did not recognize PTSD. It was back in the time, right?
Yeah.
And we didn't recognize the families that were being affected. And obviously you guys were affected. Is daddy coming home? Is daddy, going to be working late? So there is still that collateral damage, if you will, right? So we didn't have that back then, and now we're starting to realize that families are affected almost as much as our first responders, and they have to be brought in and spoken to, because when we talk about the El Paso shooting, right, those officers still going to go home, and they're gonna shut down, and their family's going to go, what happened, right? And he's going to be like, I don't want to talk about it. So how hard is it to bring everybody together, the families, the first responders, and really give an impactful talk? Is that something you guys?
Yeah, that is one of our hearts. And one of the things I want to say is we're a hybrid organization, right? And we've kind of pioneered this zone in collaborating with different disciplines. And so we get contacted from organizations and individuals across the country who've been doing this under the radar for years.
Right.
And we had that opportunity to connect with a young lady named Lori Barron out of Indiana. Who's been doing family peer support groups, right? And so that is one of our heart's desire, to go beyond just the first responder, the marriage, but also the family. It really is. There's a lot of work to be done.
We discussed this. We discussed this in the seminar the other day in the workshop, that even though PTSI is, we've been living it since World War II, and prior, shell shocked and everything else, we're still 20 years in. We're still at our infancy stages, because it's such a varied disease. It's such a varied injury. I don't want to say disease. It's such a varied injury because it impacts everybody and every family member differently. The events are countless. 1 event, 2 event, 20 events, 100 events. There's different treatments for each one. Correct? There's different ways you approach it, I guess, in a way, right?
Yeah. So each person in a family unit may be impacted in a different way. And so even though the first responder may not be symptomatic, they may have a teenager who's maybe dabbling in drugs or getting in trouble with the law, or maybe there's marriage issues. And so it comes out in different ways. It doesn't necessarily always come out as post-traumatic stress.
Right.
But you see the further outcomes of, the injuries.
Well, like I was just speaking on the show before us, we were speaking to to Minion from Virginia, and she said her husband did try to commit suicide. She got him into a program, and they started working together, and they were doing the PTSI, and she really had to baby him for 2 years and keep control. I don't want to say baby, but it was a tough road. It was a really tough road. And then after he became more healed, and she called it PTSD growth. Mm-hmm. PTSD growth. And she goes, once he started feeling, and he started smiling, she felt herself fall into a depression. It was kind of a collapse inside, because she's put all her energy into that one person to try to make them better, and then all of a sudden that person gets better, and your body just goes, woof, right?
It does.
So we got to take care of those family members as well.
Yeah, that was the thing. For me, Steve had to watch me go through all of this.
Right.
He had no idea. I mean, nobody talked about post-traumatic stress.
Not back then.
No, we had one debrief,
Right.
And then we were
At the site.
Well,
well, close to the
it
site.
was at the airport.
At the airport.
Yeah, so yeah, brainchild and the feds. Let's after 9/11 hold the debrief at the airport as we're all jumping under furniture every time a plane went by. Yeah. Yes. Oh my gosh. Because any mental health person like yourself would be like,
no,
not a good idea. Anyway, I won't digress and tell you where those people ended up. Anyway, so here I am going through this thing, and I wasn't diagnosed till 2003 officially, so 2 years went by, and I've got my husband and my mom are the closest people, and Steve has no idea how to navigate this. And my mom, luckily, she's in dentistry, healthcare. She practices hypnosis, so she was kind of like, there's something there. we need to watch this.
Yeah.
I didn't know they were having all these background conversations, but even when I was in treatment, and I want to touch on EMDR, it's not like your loved one has a clue even what that is. And so when you walk in the door from receiving this intense therapy, hey, how was your day? Okay, I'm going to kill you now. It's like, you can't ask that. So you have these the family members walking on eggshells around you, and that's so not fair and has dramatic effects. And it's taken really to just these last bunch of years that I've been really deep diving into being like, I'm like apologizing because they were doing and coping the way they knew how to cope.
Right.
I didn't let anybody in, and it was awful. And so the need for programs to expand and said, hey, first responder Sam, let's get you in here so we can tackle this and give you the strategies, tactics, and tools. But, oh, by the way, your husband, he needs to go over there and get tactics, strategies, and tactics on, on how to support and be there for you.
But let me just bring something to you, because you just said a word that you said you had to apologize.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Okay. And now I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist. I got no PhD, no nothing. Why did you have to apologize?
I really had to take a step back and realize how not okay my communication was and self-isolating them.
But you did nothing wrong.
I didn't do anything wrong at the time because I was processing this whole thing.
Right.
But I learned later on that I created the environment called Sam, Steve, Hayden living with post-traumatic stress.
But you see where I'm coming from? I mean, you shouldn't have to apologize. It's an injury. It's an injury.
Yes, it is.
If you had a broken leg and someone had to help you down the stairs, and someone had to help you down the stairs, would you apologize for putting them out?
Of course not.
All right, so by
but
you
I did put them out.
Right. But by you apologizing, puts blame in your mind and puts blame on you that you did something wrong, which you didn't. So I mean, you guys are the therapists. You
I
tell
guess
me.
I'm not coming from the blame part. Like
No,
I wasn't coming from.
I get it. I'm just kind of getting a little deep here, but thinking about that, we do apologize for putting our families through certain things, but it wasn't our fault. And if our families really wanted to support us, there would be no apology needed. It's like an injury, right? I mean, maybe I'm just looking at it at a different angle, but I'm looking at it as we're treating this as an injury. It's a broken leg. You helped me down the stairs. Okay, we both fell down the stairs. I apologize you fell, but you know what? You helped me. You supported me. I want to thank you. I don't want to apologize to you. I want to thank you for bringing me to this point in my life.
Well, it's both.
It's
both.
Okay.
I mean, like I said, it wasn't.
I'm just looking at it at a different angle.
I guess it depends on where you come from in the making things complete with the person. So
Yeah.
it wasn't, I know it wasn't my fault, the post-traumatic stress, but I didn't have to be ugly. I didn't have to ignore
But you
my
weren't meaning to be
kid.
ugly.
Yeah, I think that.
He's
I
playing
think
devil's
yes,
advocate.
he is
Yeah,
playing
you were.
devil's
You,
advocate.
I'm
Yeah.
just saying you weren't mean.
So,
Yeah.
You know, you fell into a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
We discussed this. You fell into a rabbit hole.
I'm going to
You-
say an abyss. Bigger
abyss.
bigger than a rabbit hole. Just saying. Bigger than, you know.
So
I get where you're coming
you know
from.
now as therapists, what do you think?
There's no script. No, for the family,
Yeah.
there's no
Yeah.
script. And that's why I think it's so important to provide a space to have the trainings
Mm-hmm.
and the dialogue and to have a safe place to talk about. The veterans and the military have known this for years. They provide that support for caregivers and they give them a heads up of what to expect. They have courses, they have classes for those caregivers.
Now, right now they do.
Now
or
they
they-
do.
Now
Now they do.
Now they do.
Yeah,
But
they
they
do.
are
Yeah.
far more advanced. And I think first responder organizations are looking at what the military community and the veterans are doing in some sense to add some of those pieces. But we're still a far
It's definitely
long
needed.
way
Do you
away.
think that the military is more advanced because it's one system and not multi-individual systems? We discussed this as well, how each department handles PTSI in a different way. Each state, each city handles their offices in a different way. When we look at Rowlett, who's now paving the way for a great PTSI program, but maybe El Paso Police Department, and I'm not saying El Paso doesn't have one, but I'm just throwing that name out because we discussed it, but maybe that El Paso doesn't have a great PTSI program. Is it because maybe individually that we're not as advanced as the military?
I think the military is advanced because of the research. I think a lot of it has to do, they are one system, but I don't want to.
Yeah, it's just it's one system against a
Yeah.
multi-system.
Right, right.
It has to do with the
Versus-
brain research that they've done and what they've learned about the injury, how it actually scars the brain. And I think the thing that is so important about crisis intervention is when a traumatic event happens, if you can do a direct intervention right away, because it's really a short-term solution. It's not meant to be therapy. It's emotional first aid. It's really what it is. So if you get the person talking about it, because we storytell our way through that traumatic event, the more they talk about it, 90% of them many times will just be able to return back in 2 to 3 days. It was a bad experience. They file it away where it should go. But what happens with the person that doesn't talk about it, and this is the problem with first responders. I'll just be honest with you, because my father-in-law was this way. They were taught, just have compartments, and you just stick it in that compartment.
Right.
But then one day the compartment gets full, and something happens, and then all the compartments are opened at one time. And so I think what's unique about doing crisis interventions, why I'm so passionate about it, is because we could stop a lot of people from developing the injury side. And we cannot do it until we sit down and have a hard discussion and the department actually recognizes that this is real. John, this is the problem.
So what would you say is a time frame from a traumatic event? And, now we have different levels. See, and this is where it gets difficult. We have different levels of traumatic events, right?
Yes.
We have different people who handle things differently and emotionally, right? So is there I'm sure there's not a surefire number, but, okay, I respond to a homicide, right, or a child drowning. What are we looking at before we process my brain to make sure we don't have injuries? 24 hours, 48, 72. Is there a time frame? Do we do follow-ups?
There actually is.
Okay.
Many times what will happen in a department, smaller departments where they recognize this, they'll want a crisis person to come in within the first 8 to 12 hours and just actually start talking to people. We call it one-on-one, just to kind of see how they are, to get them talking, starting to process. Because what happens when that first responder is in that event, he's got to concentrate on his job.
Right.
He can be thinking about his emotions or his kids, but what's happening many times is that child he's pulling out of that car, or that child that's on the sidewalk that's just been killed or whatever, he's got the same age child at home. So if we can get them talking within the first 12 to 24 hours, even just any type of intervention, many times they won't stuff it down. And it's always good if it can be done actually before they go off shift, as they're going off shift, before they go to sleep.
And there lies the problem.
Right. Debriefings, on the other hand, many times occur about 4 to 6 days after, especially if it's a line of duty death. They're not usually going to do a debriefing in the first 4 days.
Right.
They're going to wait till the funeral. Then they're going to sit down. And what a lot of responders tell us is they walk in the room. We had an agency that told us they had a therapist, and their job was to do debriefings. And so they came in after a traumatic event and basically said, "How you doing?" "Good." "Okay, just checking to make sure you're okay." And that was the debriefing. That's not a debriefing.
That's the norm, though.
That's
the norm.
But see, I think what's happening now is because of the suicide increase, I think now people are finally agreeing that mental health is very important to that officer, that fireman, that EMS, the RN that works in the emergency room that sees these suicides. It goes all the way across the board, even to the district attorney, the coroner's office, everyone that's handling that crisis. There needs to be some way that if they want to process that out loud, if they're having trouble with it, it should be the norm and not a stigma. And we've got to take the stigma away.
Right, but we even visited, and I'm not going to mention the group. We even visited with a EMS group not too long ago, where these guys are running 12 and 15 and 18 jobs a night, right? On a 12-hour
Calls,
tour,
yeah.
Right.
calls on a tour. Okay, they have a peer support group in-house, right? There is no time for these paramedics and first responders to even discuss peer support, because once their shift is over, after a 12-hour shift of running 11 calls, I want to crash in bed and go to sleep.
When
Right?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, after 9/11, it was mandatory 12s, and I was like, I just don't. Please don't talk to me. Just let me find a bed and go to bed.
When
Yeah.
do you have? See, and this is one of the pieces of the problem that nothing's being fixed, because one, resources are too low. All right, manpower is low. The call volume is high, and we don't have the time to take these people off the streets and debrief them or talk to them and say, "Hey, are you okay?" Because everybody's in such a zone going, "I got to get back out there. I got to get back out there. I got to do my job. I got to do my job." That's the culture.
Well,
It is.
and it takes the change in leadership. The leadership has to be the ones to step forward to say, you know what, I need to take care of my folks. So,
Do we think it's a leadership problem, or do we think it's a community problem within? Because
well, it becomes
right?
a community
It becomes
problem
a community problem.
because there's not change. There's not acceptance of change. There's not even, in some places that I've seen, an acceptance and acknowledgement that this even exists, like that it's real. That's I mean, that's crazy, right? We're in
Right.
2020, and how much research do you need to see? But it is very real, and until this is just my opinion, but until leadership across the U.S., because we're one giant community, really steps forward and puts their people first, because the more they do that, the better their department they're going to have.
Right, but then you think about this, okay? Leadership, all right? It's going to have to go to the board for money, because now I'm going to pull. All right, I'm just throwing this out there. I got 3 ambulances that went to a 5-year-old who drowned. Right, I want to pull those people off the streets and I want to debrief them. Right, I want to talk to them. Now after that 15-hour shift, I'm going to pull 6 medics off the street to talk to them. That's 3 ambulances are down. Right, so now how do I backfill those 3 medics? And now if another trauma happens, and now there's a shooting across the way, and now I got to pull another 2 ambulances off. Now I'm down 5, and it gets to that political.
Nobody said it was easy.
It's not easy.
No, but
Everybody
what I'm
said
saying,
everybody was broken.
you know,
too, and
it gets to that political. It gets to that. Now I got 5. Now I got 10. Now I got 12 ambulances that I got to pull guys off the street because the call volume is so high. The balance is not there because their resources aren't there.
Right.
We don't have the manpower, we don't have the money, and we don't have the time to put into our men. So what happens, like in New York, is we do smoke and mirrors. We put these programs in place, right, and say, hey, yes, we are your support network, but we don't want to hear from you. Get out there and do your job.
Right. Well, you just brought up the support program. So we've been talking
Right.
about crisis intervention, right?
Mm-hmm.
So another big facet, and what we're seeing is peer support.
Yes.
And the difference that peer support is making in the departments out there. So can you all explain for everybody, I think we understand the difference between CISM and the peer support, but just explain the difference once again, and how you've seen the occurrence and the departments reaching out to create peer support, what kind of change that's having.
There is an explosion happening right now with departments training training specific or selected officers or selected first responders within the departments on how to offer peer support. And so it is typically done in-house, and it's done different ways depending on the department. But I think that there is such a huge rush towards the peer support model because of what John just said. They're not using the insurance. They're not using the EAPs. They're not using the crisis response teams, and hence we're seeing this uptick in the loss of life.
Because it's like the go-to word now, peer support.
It is.
It's the go-to word.
Yeah, it's
Right.
And in my opinion, I could be wrong. It's not the end-all, be-all. It's a piece of the puzzle. Right. And I think at the end of the day, once this dies down, we've got to look at how do all of these pieces fit together. I want to go back to what you said as far as the time of a traumatic response and how long that it takes for a person to come through something like that.
Right.
It's normal to have a traumatic response after an event, and I think that's what is the benefit of training a peer support provider or a CISM trained chaplain or a crisis responder, and knowing how to normalize those symptoms. In my world, so my world is mental health, and we look at disorders. We use the DSM-5 to determine what is a diagnosis. What it says for a disorder is there is an acute traumatic response period. And what I say really for any first responder after an event, it's really that first 30 days that's critical. Your body has a natural response system. Your brain, your body goes into fight, flight, and freeze. Okay.
Right.
Your body also has a relaxation system that it readjusts to on a natural level. When the body and the brain don't readjust is when you start to look for the red flags, right? The problem is if you don't have eyes on that officer or that first responder and they're not talking, you don't know what those red flags are, and you don't know what danger zone they're in.
And that's where the peer support comes in, because they're the boots on the ground. They're the eyes on the field that should be able to say, hey, I spot that red flag, call you guys and say, hey, Frontline, we have an issue. Come here. And the peer support should go to their commanding officer and say, he needs to be pulled from the street. Right? It's got to be almost like a chain of command.
I mean, is it really the officer needs to be pulled, or because that's
You just
when
need to be aware.
we talk about that being part of the stigma is that I'm gonna get pulled off and I don't really want to. So I'm not
No.
gonna
When
say
I say
anything.
pulled, I mean pulled off the street to talk, not taking your guns away.
Oh, gotcha,
No,
gotcha.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying,
Yeah.
yo, you got. I don't know.
It's
We
just
only got
your-
about
it's just
three.
your
we-
Brooklyn
I know.
accent. It's like,
we only
pull
got
off
we
the
only got
street.
about 3 minutes. But what I'm saying is, so when we look at pieces of the puzzle, we look at the peer support group. He's going to recognize the signs, and now he sees a good officer. All of a sudden, wow, he's getting a little violent. He's getting angry, but he knows that 3 days ago he was involved in, a drowning of a child, right? So he turns around and says, "Hey, boss, these are the signs this officer is showing. I think you should call in, say, Frontline, and have him debriefed, and maybe see if there's anything that's bothering him, right?"
Absolutely.
Shouldn't that be a better way, instead of someone coming up to the peer, going to his peer support partner and saying, I mean, that's one way of doing it.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I think for them to see the red flags and notify people as such.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think
You
it's
know.
important, just real quick, I know we're close to being out of time.
Yeah, we good.
Our peer support system and team exists outside of a department.
Right,
And so we're
outside.
not connected to anybody, right? We don't do fitness for duties. We don't do any of that. We're simply there to offer support.
And that's what makes it all more better, is that they could say, hey, you partner up with certain police departments, peer support groups that call you in and say, hey, they had a drowning. They give you the debris. They tell you the background, and you just sit with the officer. I mean, I think that's the best way to do it, instead of and I think that will kind of take away the stigma.
Yeah, it's possible. So since we have just a few minutes,
Yep.
how do people that are listening, officers, how do they get in touch with you? What's the best way?
They can call our number.
Okay.
214
Good.
865-6710. You can
I'm gonna
also
put
find
this-
us online at frontlinecrisisresponse.com.
Can you see it up on the screen?
No, I
Frontline
can't see it.
Crisis Response.
Okay,
What's
it's
the phone number?
214
Right.
865-6710. Okay.
You can also find us on Facebook.
Yes.
Yay, Facebook.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. I got that up there.
Got it.
Okay.
All right.
I'm still learning this whole thing, so bear with me. I just pinned it. I just pinned the phone number for the Frontline Crisis Response Solutions. So if there is a problem, call them. And I just saw somebody. Hold on one second. I know we only got 2 minutes, but Laura just joined on. Hey, Laura, thanks for joining in. Don't you call that number right now, because we'll talk after this. So I know how you're feeling. But otherwise, that's a veteran thing. Do you guys process vets as well, or just first responders?
At this time, we just offer support for first responders.
First responders.
But
It's
a
a
lot
it's a
of
different
first
thing.
responders are
Veterans.
veterans.
Right. It's
they
kind of
are.
a different thing.
So if
Right,
you're a
right,
veteran
right.
first
Yes.
responder, you fall
Yes,
under
yes,
the
yes.
umbrella.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're gonna wrap it up. I think this was a great show. We're gonna definitely have you guys back on again.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us
29th.
on.
29th.
The 29th will be at the V-Rock at 4210 Industrial Street in Rowlett, Texas. The V-Rock will be offering this workshop of HEAL, our first responders, PTSD and our first responders. Please register online at www.abadgeofhonor.com. And we are glad to be back in the studio. Hopefully all these kinks will be taken care of, but we are definitely going to have Frontline back in the studio again, because this is going to be a topic of discussion that's not going to end. All right. So until next week, join me and Sam every Wednesday from 6 to 7 right here on the Fishbowl Radio Network at Globe Life Park.
Thank you.
Thank you.